evening, and welcome to the channel. I'm Skybridge. Tonight, I bring the most gripping story of the murder of Bafana and Orlando. Pirates goalkeeper Senzo Meyiwa. In October 2014, marked one of South Africa's most high-profile unsolved homicide cases, igniting years of speculation, public outrage, and multiple attempts at resolution. The intricate web of the case has enveloped numerous law enforcement officials, suspects and witnesses, with two notable figures, Lieutenant General Shadrack, Sibiya and Constable Sizwe Zungu playing crucial, yet often contested roles. The present report explores the complex professional and personal dynamics between Sibia and Zungu, focusing on their respective contributions to the investigation, their interactions, and the subsequent impact on legal proceedings and public perception. Drawing from a wide array of contemporary web sources and official reports, the analysis situates their roles within broader law enforcement and social contexts, providing a comprehensive understanding of their influence on the Meyiwa case's narrative and legacy. Sibiya's role in the Senzo Meyiwa investigation as Hawk's head. Perhaps one of the most hotly debated topics is the nature of Sibiya's involvement in the Senzo Meyiwa murder investigation. As Gauteng's Hawk's head when Meyiwa was killed in October 2014, Sibiya's unit was informally present at the early stages of the case, but was not officially assigned investigative responsibility. Sibiya himself has consistently stated that his role was minimal and functioned mostly in a support capacity. At no stage have I obtained a statement, conducted any investigation, or directed any investigator. So my role was very minimal, Sibiya told the media. According to his accounts, then Police Commissioner Ria Fiega decided that only detectives would handle the Meyiwa docket, thereby excluding the Hawks from formal leads and active investigations. Nonetheless, Sibiya's name surfaced periodically in connection with the murder probe, often amid rumors that he had either stalled the investigation or participated in a cover-up intended to shield powerful individuals. In his own defense, Sibiya openly voiced his frustration and desire to lead the investigation, going so far as to plead for a role in cracking the case. I am, in fact, begging, give me the Senzo Meyiwa case. Some of us would like to investigate that case. Yet, he adamantly denied ever seeing the investigation docket or obstructing case progress. The true extent of Sibiya's involvement, particularly during his suspension, when he operated as a civilian, became a key point of contention as the case evolved. Evidence of Sibiya's involvement during his suspension, court testimony, and cross-examinations in 2023 laid bare the ambiguity surrounding Sibiya's actual contributions during his years out of official law enforcement employ. According to Constable Sizwe Zungu, Sibiya was integrally involved in meetings regarding Meyiwa's alleged assassins as late as 2019, years after his termination from the Hawks. Zungu asserted that his cluster commander, Major General Vincent Leshabane, had told him Sibiya was the Hawk's head, and that Leshabane invited Sibiya to critical discussions to brief him about key suspects and developments in the case. Notably, Sibiya is said to have proposed involving Hawks investigator Warrant Officer Meshach Mahubo in listening to Zungu's intelligence, which pointed to the eventual arrest of suspects. Muzi Sibiya, not related, and Bangani and Tanzi. However, Defense Counsel Sifo Ramosepele challenged the legitimacy of Sibiya's intervention, highlighting that at the time of the 2019 meeting, Sibiya was not a SAPS officer and was essentially a civilian. The court record shows that Zungu only learned of Sibiya's fired status afterward, admitting he had believed Sibiya to be a police officer at the time of their interaction. Sibiya's unofficial engagement as a civilian consultant without formal SAPS authority has been criticized for blurring professional conduct boundaries and raising questions about chain of custody, case integrity, and potential interference. The issue was further complicated by contradictory accounts from Sibiya himself, who in a 2018 radio interview flatly denied any post-suspension involvement, stating, "I'm not connected with the Senzo Meyiwa investigation and have never participated. I can't fathom why my name is being implicated." Do you think he was telling the truth? Despite the apparent lack of a direct mandate, multiple witnesses and official sources confirmed Sibiya's participation in Off the Book, investigative meetings and strategy sessions in 2019, a period that directly preceded significant breakthroughs in identifying suspects, Sibiya's public statements on the Meyiwa case, Throughout his evolving association with the Meyiwa investigation, Sibiya has been vocal in rejecting allegations of negligence, obstruction, or cover-up. In public statements to various media houses, he emphasized his limited advisory role and underscored his lack of access to the murder docket or authority to direct detective work. He insisted that his contributions were restricted to crime scene security and logistical support in the immediate aftermath of Senzo Meyiwa's death, not investigation or case leadership. Sibiya also leveraged his public platform to defend his professional reputation and integrity, citing decades of high-level investigative experience that, in his view, discredited allegations that he would contaminate evidence or mishandle a homicide scene. At the same time, he maintained that institutional decisions outside his control kept the Hawks at arm's length during the initial phases of the Meyiwa probe. Even as speculation about his involvement persisted, notably Sibiya's ability to shape public perception benefited from judicial findings in his favor, especially the labor court's ruling that cleared him of the wrongdoing. Cited it in his 2015 suspension, these legal victories served as leverage in media and public discourse, reinforcing Sibiya's self-portrayal as a wronged rather than culpable official. However, ongoing accusations of police mismanagement and political interference have ensured that his reputation remains a source of controversy and debate. Constable Sizwe Zungu professional background. Constable Sizwe Kumbuzo Zungu is a lower-ranking police officer with approximately a decade of service within the SAPS at the time of the Meyiwa trial. Hailing originally from KwaZulu-Natal and stationed in Gauteng, Zungu distinguished himself from other witnesses through his proximity to the accused and his contentious dual role as both an ordinary attendee and a police officer at the Vosloris hostel on the night of October 26, 2014, when Meyiwa was killed. Zungu's police role has come under scrutiny during cross-examinations, as defense counsel pointedly highlighted perceived derelictions of duty such as failing to arrest individuals handling firearms, not reporting suspicious behavior immediately, and even allegedly sharing alcohol with the suspects while off duty. Legal experts and the public alike have debated whether his professional conduct as a police officer conformed to expectations or undermined the credibility of his later testimony. Despite the controversy, Zungu has remained adamant about his version of events, maintaining under oath that what he saw on the night of Meyiwa's murder was both shocking and ultimately crucial to the case. Details of interactions between Sibia and Zungu. The professional and investigatory interactions between Sibia and Zungu were revealed as both consequential and controversial during the trial. Zungu testified that he met with Sibiya in 2019 at the behest of Maj Genleshabane, who relayed to him that Sibiya was still regarded as an authoritative Hawks figure by his peers, even as he was, in reality, a civilian at the time. Zungu expressed that he supplied his detailed account to Sibiya directly, and Sibiya in turn opined that the account was correct and accurate, based on his understanding of the case and available facts. During the discussions, Sibiya demonstrated particular interest in the integrity and progress of the investigation, going as far as suggesting which Hawks officers should be brought into the fold. This included a recommendation to involve Meshach Makubo, one of the officers later tasked with analyzing the so-called second docket, a set of investigative records that advanced alternative theories about what transpired on the night of Meyiwa's murder. The court record indicates that despite Sibiya's civilian status, he was privy to sensitive investigative information and maintained considerable informal influence within select circles of law enforcement. The nuance surrounding his presence and authority in these interactions became a major point of legal argument, especially as the defense underscored concerns over procedural irregularities and questioned the legitimacy of Sibiya's advice or authorizations during his hiatus from formal police work, points of contention in Sibia and Zungu's testimonies. In the adversarial environment of the trial, both Sibiya's and Zungu's accounts came under relentless scrutiny, often exposing inconsistencies, contradictions, and potential vulnerabilities that the defense exploited. Sibiya's account hinges on a technical separation between crime, scene assistance, and investigative leadership. He insists his role was limited and logistical, with no interference in the chain of evidence or case direction. In contrast, Zungu described interactions in which Sibiya appeared actively involved and knowledgeable about minute case details, even offering strategic suggestions about investigative direction and personnel. This incongruity remains unresolved in the official record. Defense advocates highlighted these contradictions, querying Sibiya's asserting correctness about information to which he was not, by design, privy during his suspension. Zungu, meanwhile, was challenged about the appropriateness of providing sensitive information to someone with ambiguous status and about not reporting sooner, especially as a serving police officer. These disputes were repeatedly referenced in court, cross-examinations as undermining the credibility of both the investigation and the testimonies of the individuals involved, collaboration outcomes, and investigative impact. Despite doubts about process and professionalism, the interactions between Sibiya and Zungu contributed to significant investigatory outcomes. Foremost among these was the breakthrough identification of suspects Sibiya and Ntanzi, stemming from combined intelligence shared during the 2019 meetings, although the veracity and chain of statements and confessions are disputed, especially in light of later affidavits retracting or denying previous testimony. The collaboration set the stage for a renewed police push into previously cold leads. Key investigative steps such as the tracing of a murder weapon through an unrelated taxi murder, the profiling and cross-referencing of cell phone records, and the collation of witness identifications all occurred after Zungu's revelations and Sibiya's suggestions to involve additional Hawks officers. The investigative team, under the leadership of Brigadier Bongani Gininda, subsequently leveraged these links to justify arrests and formal charges against the 5 men currently standing trial. At the same time, the convoluted nature of the collaboration raised doubts within the public and among the defense regarding potential contamination of evidence, witness coaching, or the manipulation of investigative outcomes based on unofficial or improperly channeled information. These concerns form the core of the defense's attempt to establish reasonable doubt over the prosecution's version of events, impact on the legal proceedings narrative and in court. The contributions and interactions of Sibia and Zungu are central to the unfolding narrative before the Pretoria High Court. On one hand, Zungu's testimony placing the accused at the crime scene, recounting post-murder celebrations, and directly implicating individuals through observed actions, provided the state with one of its strongest links between the accused and the crime. Legal analysts have noted that without Zungu's statements, the evidence chain would be even weaker, undermined by forensic mishaps, loss of material, and contradictions in earlier testimony from other witnesses. However, the narrative has been persistently challenged by the defense, who have argued that procedural missteps, such as Sibiya's role as a civilian, delayed reporting, possible witness contamination, and the shifting status of testimony, collectively render the prosecution's case unreliable. They have introduced photographic alibis, highlighted breaks in the chain of evidence, and argued that Zungu's credibility is undermined by his own admission of withholding information, purportedly to safeguard himself. The controversial relationship between Sibiya and Zungu has thus not only shaped the narrative of the case, but has become a central battleground over which broader issues of police competence, ethical conduct, and justice are contested. The resultant skepticism has, in turn, complicated the court's assessment of whether the prosecution has succeeded in proving the charges beyond reasonable doubt. Media portrayal of Sibiya and Zungu in the Meyiwa case. South African media coverage of the roles played by Sibiya and Zungu has oscillated between intrigue, skepticism, and open criticism. Sibiya, once lionized for anti-corruption efforts and daring investigations, has contended with persistent allegations of misconduct, cover-ups, and controversial leadership decisions, such as the disbandment of the Political Killings Unit. News and opinion pieces variously frame him as a scapegoat or a compromised leader. with legal reinstatements often cited to support the former view. Even as critics continue to decry SAPS's recycling of embattled officials, Zungu's media portrait is similarly complex. His testimony was often billed as a bombshell capable of turning the case. But equally his actions, socializing with suspects, consuming alcohol, delaying disclosure were dissected as possible evidence of unprofessionalism or even fabrication. Sections of the press have empathized with the dangers he faced after coming forward, highlighting attempted intimidation by suspects, families, and the need for state protection. Others, especially in defense-focused coverage, have zeroed in on legal experts questioning his reliability as both a witness and an officer. The intensity of live and digital trial coverage, including encounters with death threats and judicial admonishments, has further elevated both men to lightning rods for the nation's anxieties over the case. Role of other key investigators in context. The Meyiwa murder case has rotated through the hands of several lead investigators, with Bongani Jininda emerging as the current public face of the homicide probe. Jininda's endorsement of Zungu's evidence as pivotal is central to the prosecution, especially since his team coordinated the transition from the initial and, by some accounts, botched early investigation to the renewed effort that led to the chain of suspect arrests. Colonel Vincent Leshabane also played a linking role in facilitating connections between Zungu, Sibiya, and other investigative personnel. Warrant Officer Meshach Makubo was assigned portions of the second docket, an alternative investigative trail that explored different scenarios, including the possibility of persons inside the house being involved in the shooting. The existence of multiple dockets, parallel teams, and divided investigative leadership exposed deep institutional rift. This context of organizational flux and sometimes open dissent within SAPS arguably complicated Sibia's and Zungu's roles and contributed to the impression that the investigation was chaotic, fractured, and vulnerable to mismanagement or manipulation. Public perception and reactions influenced by their roles. The public's perception of the Meyiwa murder case reflects broader South African anxieties about crime, corruption, and justice. For many, the case came to symbolize the failures of law enforcement to deliver accountability. For even the most prominent victims, stoking deep skepticism about the motives and effectiveness of SAP's leadership. Both Sibiya and Zungu were drawn into this maelstrom. Sibiya as a symbol of both anti-corruption valor and, paradoxically, institutional role. Zungu as a potential whistleblower, whose integrity and motives were simultaneously lauded and questioned. Notably, segments of civil society, commentators, and former police officials reflected hope that breakthroughs attributed to the combined efforts of Sibiya, Zungu, and Jininda might finally yield justice after years of frustration. Others cited the sheer number of compromised statements, witness reversals, and parallel investigations as evidence that the justice system was and remains unreliable. The public discourse, amplified by social media, often overlaid legitimate concerns about safety, given direct threats against witnesses and officials, with conspiracy theories or partisan narratives tied to broader political contestation in post-apartheid South Africa, persistent doubts about Sibiya's authority during his suspension, his influence on the investigation as a civilian, and Zungu's conduct as a police official have left sections of the public divided over whether the fault lines in the case are the result of deliberate conspiracy, systemic dysfunction, or mere unfortunate coincidence. Assessing influence and legacy. In summation, the roles, interactions, and narratives constructed around Shadrach, Sibiya, and Constable Sizwe Zungu have had a profound, if contentious, impact on the trajectory and perception of the Senzo Meyiwa murder investigation. Sibiya's checkered history, interlaced with both distinguished service and recurring controversy, shaped the context in which he could influence but not officially steer. The renewed investigation sometimes blurring the lines of civilian and police authority. Zungu, with his unique proximity to both suspects and investigating officers, became the state's linchpin witness. Though his delayed coming forward and perceived lapses as a police officer have diluted the conclusiveness of his testimony, the interplay between the two, framed by meetings arranged by mutual connections like Leshabane, catalyzed decisive shifts in the investigation's momentum, resulting in the official identification and prosecution of suspects. long after public faith in the inquiry was eroding. Yet the controversies engendered by their association, emblematic of larger issues of institutional trust, witness security, and procedural purity, have continued to shape not only the courtroom narrative but also the national conversation about justice for Senzo Meyiwa. Their stories underline the broader crisis in South African policing, one marked by professional rivalries, shifting accountability, and the daunting challenge of solving crimes that cut to the heart of public trust. Regardless of the trial's ultimate verdict, the dynamics between Shadrach, Sibia, and Zungu will remain a focal point for scholars, journalists, and citizens seeking to understand how truth, power, and justice intersect in modern South Africa. Let me know your thoughts about all these in the comment section down below. Your voice matters. If this video was informative, hit the like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for watching. Skybridge checking out. Bye.